a foreign policy is the general objectives that guide the activities and relationships of one state in its interaction with other states. How has the United States of America, under the Obama administration, interacted with these other states? Obama's foreign policy is a foreign policy characterized by disengagement towards different nations. He believed that military had less value over diplomacy. He believed that negotiation and political will in democratic nations would bring more progress than what foreign interventions ever would. But when we talk about the harms and benefits of foreign policy, we must take its real-world implication and its consequences as a yardstick. The results of the foreign policy are more relevant to the debate than its intended consequences. Now, we would like to begin by telling you that the United States of America is responsible towards the global community today, and it has always been. USA has been the world's policeman for decades now, and has created this image knowingly for itself by going to the aid of the small guy's defense time and again. We see that the United States is responsible for the global community's stability primarily for three particular reasons. Because they have the strongest military, they have the most overarching economy, and they have the greatest diplomatic leverage power. Now, just because they have these, why are they responsible for the stability of the global community? When we look at conflicted areas, then we see that the United States of America as having the greatest ability to bring change in those kind of areas. If we look at their military power, then they spend more than the next 7 nations combined, and they have the highest technological capability. So when it comes to conflicted areas, if they're able to use their military might, then we see that if they don't use it, then they're responsible for the harm that happens in that area. Now secondly, we talk about the economy. The United States of America is virtually responsible for the stability of almost each nation in this world today. It's because of the global integrated economy. And because of their trade relationship with almost all countries in the world, then they can use it to flex about and bring negotiations on the table by using it as a very, very restrictive force, such as using it in cases of sanctions to bring about changes. And thirdly, we see diplomacy where they can bring different actors to the table because how they perceive these nations, one second sir, is important to these very nations. Now before I move on with our arguments today, yes?
Which do you prefer, a diplomatic disengaged America that can bring people to the table, or an America that uses its military might?
Again, the real problem that we see is that because he's been disengaging and rather trying to take the easy way out, the consequences of these diplomatic talks that you talk about have not been very effective. The diplomacy that you talk about has not really brought about any change in the world today, where it could have been more effective if instead of disengaging with diplomacy, they had been more consequential in their actions. Now we bring to you 3 reasons why Obama has caused more harm than benefits. Firstly, it is with a disengagement in the Middle East. Secondly, it is because of their actions that have caused distrust between their allies. And thirdly, in his harms, in his failure, in his movement towards making Asia his priority. I will talk about the disengagement in the Middle East by firstly starting with his unstrategic management of Iraq after the Bush administration. In 2010, after the White House failed to secure an agreement with Baghdad that would have allowed sizable US forces to remain in Iraq and form a stable government, Obama declared the war in Iraq over. As subsequent events have shown, a war is not simply over because the President of the United States says it is. Obama's accelerated and haphazard withdrawal from Iraq created various power vacuums where factions such as ISIS were able to come in and take over. If the United States of America had stayed in and rather just and not left under the cloak of diplomacy and democracy, then we would have a stable government in Iraq today. We would have a situation in which ISIS does not control most of the area. We would not have a situation in which ISIS can go over and pretty much take over any city that they want. No, thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Obama claimed that we're leaving behind a sovereign, stable, and self-reliant Iraq. Yet, instead of a responsibly phased withdrawal of US troops from Iraq, USA cut and run. The White House says that they did not have a choice in the matter, that their diplomatic relations were not good enough. That is why Iraq refused to sign an agreement to allow United States troops to remain. But the truth is that Obama did not use all of America's political, economic, and military influence that they have in Iraq to secure that agreement by which US troops could have stayed and could have helped bring up a better democracy that they talk about. 5 years from this time, 5 years from their withdrawal in Iraq, Iran has more influence in Baghdad than ever before and calls the shots in the Shia-dominated southern part of the country. The Kurds, who are forced to fight literally for their livelihoods, have essentially carved out a de facto nation state that includes important oil-producing cities like Kirkuk. Put simply, Iraq is a mess because of the diplomacy that they talk about. Yes, sir.
Every day that Iraqi civilians saw American troops raiding their houses, there were more and more people converted to become ISIS extremists. Why would Obama want to stay in that
Wrong,
Iraq?
sir. The problem with what you're talking about is that when we say we want military influence in Iraq, it is not to invade houses or kill people. It is merely what was already in place, which is technical assistance to the military already in Iraq. So we do not see, we as side proposition do not propose that Obama's administration should have been fighting literally. Their military should have been in place to influence the decisions and outcomes that took part in the country for a better democracy. Now, in forms of assistance and expertise training, we would want them there. More importantly, what was required from US leadership in that region has been absent for years. Deterring from their responsibilities in that area has had its consequences. When the US does not use its global economic, political, and military influence to improve situations in Iraq, we see it as not fulfilling their responsibility, and also we see the real world consequences of it as being fathers, mothers, daughters, and sons being killed and being raped or being displaced just because Obama was not able to fulfill his responsibility in these areas. Now, another problem we see today is the situation in Syria and ISIS. Early 2011, ISIS had no trainings, they had no arms, they had no organizational structures. Obama administration went in and they trained the Syrian rebel army. Now we see this as counterproductive because today whatever arms that they have, whatever sophisticated arms ISIS does obtain, it is from the US military. And this direct engagement rather than military assistance of the power in place helped bring about revolt in the nation. And we see it as directly aiding ISIS. But the problem really is not only with the creation of ISIS, but it is also with how the United States of America has dealt with it. Obama's response to the rise of ISIS and the deterioration of Iraq has been incremental. He has chosen to do the bare minimum required to make it look like as though he is doing something, but in actually he is doing next to nothing at all. These further points will be furthered by my second speaker. Thank you.